Oh boy, we are off to a rough start. What is up, bot fans? Jellyman here, and I want to share my thoughts about the first 5 episodes of the new season of BattleBots, the Pro League. I wanted to wait until a good checkpoint to be able to review the first handful of episodes. Now that round 1 just finished and every bot had their first fight, I think this is a good starting point to share my thoughts. And I wanted to wait a little bit until a few episodes came out, so I had a bit more of a fair comparison rather than just judging the first episode. So with all of that said, I have a lot of critiques about the show so far. Some of the things I like, and I'll go over the good stuff first. Chris and Kenny are still fantastic. Their humor is great. Their dialogue is great. Easily the best parts of the show for me. Vrook's intros are also really good. He's always, spitting bars, but they're a bit shorter this time, but they're still good. The fights themselves are pretty good as well. I can't really judge the fights all that much because that's the one part of the show that the producers really can't control. I mean, they can control some of the matchups, sure, but they can't really make every fight super entertaining because sometimes a robot will just die in 10 seconds, and other times it'll be like a pushing match for 3 minutes. So, the fights themselves are pretty good. There were some pretty shocking upsets, like Malice beating Endgame. I certainly was not expecting that. Mad Catter beating Tombstone, not too surprising, but I think the way Tombstone went out was interesting. I'll talk about that later in the video. But that's pretty much it for the good stuff. Now we got to get into the bad stuff. And oh boy, there's a lot to dissect here. First off, let's cover the main point that has been beaten to death and that everyone unanimously agrees is horrendous: the editing. And yes, the editing in the first episode is so bad, it looks like they intentionally tried to make it work on TikTok. Yeah, TikTok, that one platform that's just so abysmally bad and absolutely destroys people's attention span. Yeah, the first episode feels very much like that. It is just nauseating to watch, with the incredibly close shots of, a zoomed in perspective, or the hundreds of jump cuts, and yes, I do mean hundreds of jump cuts that just make it so hard to focus on what's going on. You have barely any coverage of, behind the scenes or the pits or anything like that, or, the robot analysis of the damage or anything, and it just immediately cut. It is so hard to watch. I'm glad, though, that after the first episode, they released a statement saying that, yeah, they were a bit too aggressive with the editing, trying to make it fit YouTube, and by extension TikTok, that they went back into the other episodes and re-edited them, which is actually really nice to hear. The fact that a, larger company or studio is, taking criticism, properly, and trying to fix these mistakes is nice to hear. And that's part of the reason why I waited to make this video, because I wanted to see how it evolved. And absolutely, the episodes after this drastically improve the editing. It is like night and day. It is so much better in the later episodes. That, yeah, there is a bit more time with the pits and the builders. There's a bit more breathing room. Things aren't, so zoomed in. Things aren't cutting, constantly. You have more time per shot. It definitely is a lot better. So I do like that they improved the editing. The one thing they did not improve, however, is the pacing. And this is my biggest issue with the show so far. The pacing, to me, is the worst aspect of this season. It is way too fast. The episodes are only 20 minutes long. That is not nearly enough time for a BattleBots episode. And the fact that they're trying to cram in 3 fights into 20 minutes is shocking. I mean, earlier seasons, you had 1 fight every 15 minutes. And now you're trying to cram 3 fights in 20 minutes. It's just way, way too fast. And you can tell when you watch it, too. You'll have Chris and Kenny talking about a bot, and then bam, Vrook is introducing them, and bam, then there's the bot, then bam, there's a button press, and bam, the fight starts. It just happens so fast. All of that happens in the span of like a minute, when earlier seasons actually gave a bit more time and dialogue with that. Granted, sometimes a bit too much, but that kind of leads into my next point. I think they're trying to overcompensate for the criticisms of earlier seasons. A lot of people had issues with the earlier seasons of the show when it was still on TV, that the pacing was way too slow. And in some areas, I agree. I think seasons 4 through 7, the pacing wasn't quite right, because you had a lot of commercial breaks. You had them at weird times, like just before a fight, and then when you got back to the fight, it was over in 30 seconds. So definitely there was some bad commercial placement, I would say. And yeah, there was sometimes too much time spent on the builders or their backstory or whatnot, and not enough time on the fights. I do agree that the pacing of seasons 4 through 7 was a bit too slow, and they definitely could have improved it. However, now I feel like they're trying to go too far in the opposite direction. Now it feels too fast, because things are just flying by at a blistering pace. You can't really digest it. I think the first 3 seasons nailed the pacing perfectly. Seasons 1 and 2 is mostly just kind of the bracket. They didn't really have like qualifying matches necessarily, but season 3 started the fight night format, and I think they got the pacing perfect in that season, because everything was paced very evenly, and it wasn't too fast and it wasn't too slow, and that was in 1 hour. Season 4 had a much larger field, and so of course they introduced more bots and bigger fight cards. But the problem is those episodes were 2 hours long. So the pacing was good for most of it, but then that last half an hour, you were just waiting for that one main event. And while building up hype is good for the main event, it's good to build up hype for a legendary fight, sometimes they would kind of drag it out for that last half an hour just to get to the fight, and it definitely killed the mood a bit. Now, unfortunately, in this season, they're kind of not doing enough of that. They have the opposite problem, where now there's zero hype or build up to any of the fights. So you don't really feel excited for them. Even when it's top tier versus top tier, you don't really feel all that excited, because there's just no build-up or hype whatsoever. You hear them talk about it, Farouk announces them, they press the button, and the fight starts. Like, it's within a minute. It just goes by way too fast. There's no hype or analysis whatsoever. But to be fair, there were a lot of people from the earlier seasons who thought the episodes were too long, and they kind of just fast-forwarded through most of the episode and then only watched just the fights, because they wanted to skip all the dialogue and the, pre-fight build-up, the post-fight analysis, all of that. And so they saw it as filler, and they kind of just skipped it just to see the fights. That's fine. And I do like the idea of wanting to make the episodes shorter and more digestible, so that people who want to see the fights are able to cut to the chase. They can watch the full episode in one sitting. It's only 20 minutes. It's a lot easier to sit through. I totally understand that, and that's fine. Until they posted a video of just the fights on YouTube a few days later. And then they kept doing it.
What?
This absolutely baffled me when I first saw it, because I thought the whole point of making the episodes shorter and having faster pacing was so that people can watch the entire episode in one sitting in a more digestible package and cut to the chase with the fights. There's a lot less filler now, so people can just see just the fights. They kind of stripped it down to the essentials, the main, meat and potatoes of the show. If that is the case, why do we need a separate video posted on the same platform of just the fights? And this is not an international issue, for example, where the UK couldn't see the episodes of the earlier seasons and had to wait a few years before they were able to watch them. Here, one of the main selling points of this season is that all of the episodes are uploaded straight to YouTube, which means any country, anywhere in the world, can watch the entire episode the minute it releases. So, therefore, everyone already has access to the episode now. Everyone can see it. There's no exclusivity. Everyone can watch it. And they made the pacing faster and shorter and more digestible. So why is there a need to post a separate video of just the fights? You're already taking a trimmed down or cut down episode and now cutting it even further to the absolute bare bones. Why do we need a video of just the fights when the full episode that contains those fights is already visible on the same platform? It just feels redundant. And if you are going to post a video of just the fights on the same platform, then why do you feel the need to cut down on the content from the main episode? It just like one cancels out the other. One makes the other redundant. There's just no need to have both. Because if they were planning on posting just the fights by themselves on YouTube, I would have preferred having more content in the full episode. It would have made it a more worthwhile and fulfilling watch rather than just kind of breezing through everything. So I really don't understand what their angle is here, and I still think that the pacing is the worst aspect of the show. It is just, the editing is better, but it is still just blisteringly fast. Clearly, there was more that they filmed that they could have included that they just didn't. It's like they filmed everything they could have needed and then took a chainsaw to it. Because I guarantee there's more footage out there somewhere in the original cut of having a longer episode. You could have easily made the episode 45 minutes. That would have been perfect and matched the pacing of season 3. That would have been absolutely perfect. Even 30 minutes would have been okay. I wouldn't have minded a 30-minute episode at like the bare minimum. But 20 is just way too short. For 3 fights, 20 is just way too short. Another criticism I have is the fight music. Why do we have background music during fights now? You know, on paper, you might think it's to make it more entertaining, but the whole spectacle of the fight was hearing the metal clash, seeing parts go flying around, hearing Chris and Kenny's reaction, hearing the crowd roar when there was a massive hit. We don't really have as much of that now. It's still there a little bit, but this kind of background percussion music kind of just takes away from that, because now you're not really hearing the audience or Chris and Kenny as well, and you can barely hear the bots clang and clash, and it really kind of just distracts from the spectacle of the fight, because all you hear for the most part is just this music playing. And I don't know why they added this. It makes the fight feel more like a highlight reel rather than the actual full fight. I already made a video discussing how I don't like the judging criteria and think it should be changed. But, you know, we don't really need to bring that up. I'm sure, you know, this season, it's just regular status quo, you know, same old, same old. What could possibly go wrong?
If this goes to the judges, they're going to be scoring on 2 criteria, damage and engagement.
Okay, so they changed the judging criteria and didn't explain any of it one bit. Apparently now there's only 2 criteria. It's damage and engagement, which is essentially just the same thing as aggression. And I have to ask, why? Why is the control category just completely gone now? As if control bots didn't already have a difficult time staying relevant in the meta. Now, the main category that they used to dominate when it came to the judges' scorecards is just completely gone. I have no idea why they made this change, and they don't bother explaining it. I didn't even know that the criteria had changed. It was just kind of like said in passing by Chris Rose, as if it was just common knowledge. Like, this is a huge change to the show that they just glossed over. I'm really baffled by that. This is a major aspect of the show that you should definitely explain what the changes are, why the changes are there, and how they're going to impact the meta. But they just didn't. They just glossed over it. Another thing they glossed over, tap outs. Yeah, bots can tap out now. This is another thing that drastically changes the meta and is just never really explained why it's here. I can kind of understand it from a defensive standpoint of not wanting your bot to get eviscerated because you have to rebuild it for the next fight, but that never stopped them in previous seasons. Granted, this is more of a round-robin style format where they kind of know who their next opponent's going to be, so they can choose to tap out to save their bot and, you know, keep it intact for the next fight, the next opponent they have to face. But all that does is just give the opponent you lost to a faster knockout time. And knockout times are crucial for getting a high place on the leaderboards. So by tapping out, what you're effectively doing is giving your opponent a faster knockout time, which is going to cause them to rank higher on the leaderboards and make it more difficult for you to beat them. The whole point of BattleBots is to fight to the death. If you're getting massive carnage, you're getting massive carnage. That's the whole risk of the fight. That's what makes it entertaining. A bot can be absolutely, completely annihilated. BattleBots is the ultimate test of strength and endurance. How long can you survive? How much punishment can you take to make it to the final and win the giant nut? And having the ability to tap out and quit the fight early in order to preserve your bot and limit damage kind of laughs in the face of what BattleBots is all about. It's really the antithesis to the spirit of the show. What's funny is that years ago in season 4, Chris Rose even made a joke about this when Gigabyte tried to tap out in its fight against Tombstone when it lost its shell.
Hey, Brent, this is BattleBots. There's no tapping out. This ain't no WWE league.
Speaking of Tombstone, I gotta say, that ending segment where Tombstone forfeits was really heartbreaking. It's sad to see such a legend bow out early because he just doesn't have the resources to take on the new opponents. But Chris Rose having a heart-to-heart with Ray Billings and Ray getting choked up was really sweet. Behind the spectacle, behind the competition, in the pits, everyone's friends. And it's really nice to see Chris highlight the importance of Ray in this sport because he really is a legend. I mean, he's basically the mascot of the show, and this sport would not be the same without him. Those are my thoughts on the first 5 episodes of BattleBots. Basically, the entirety of round 1. But I want to hear what you guys have to say. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.